And down goes Trump. So everyone kind of recommended that I didn't do this sort of thing, but no, let's do this thing. I might have had a little bit of drink tonight. Kind of maybe a bit of a celebration, maybe just a little bit, just a little bit of a celebration. And so here we are. This is how the map looks at the moment. First of all, Biden is winning by 3%. Yeah, 3%. Hello, stream! So I was calling this on my Thunderfoot channel. I was putting up graphs of not Pennsylvania, Georgia. And Georgia was going to be wafer thin. It really was going to be wafer thin. And if you take a look at it, what is it? It's, oh my God, it's like 245 to 244. It's not even that. It's 2,450 to 2,449. It's one part in 2,500. Yes, I have had just a little bit of drink tonight. It's been a good day. So, bizarrely enough, there was only one guy I know who was actually kind of rooting for Trump, and he's still kind of rooting for recounts. I'm not so sure that's going to help that much. I mean, if you just take a look, right, at the end votes in places like Wisconsin. Wisconsin. What's he up in Wisconsin? It's actually, Wisconsin is one of the closer ones. It's 0.7%. That's, maybe you can get somewhere with a recount there. Michigan, not even close. Michigan, he's down by 3%. Pennsylvania, this flipped earlier today. It's 0.2%. It's likely, if you believe all those people who were there, all those liberal elite types with their statistics, it's likely to go at least a percent or so up for Biden. Georgia, this was declared early this morning where I am, and I just want to check everyone can hear me. Can everyone hear me? Trump won't concede. You're damn right Trump won't concede. And what do we got? Arizona, there was talk that he was going to come back in Arizona. I thought Arizona was more counted than that, but okay, no, there was still potential for a comeback in Arizona. So I was following the comeback in Arizona earlier, and there's a line that you've got to go up to actually catch up to flip the vote, and he was almost on that line, slightly below it. So yeah, Arizona's probably not going to flip. And Nevada is definitely not going to flip. That's 1.7%, with all the remaining votes coming in from so Democrat areas. Thank you for enjoying the election streams. So I think Biden only needed Nevada and Georgia, and it was a tie. And there's part of me that kind of thought, okay, there's not actually been a tie for over 100 years, which would be, oh my God. And then you think about, like, a tie with Trump? Seriously? And, if you go into the rules with a tie, it's one party gets to elect someone to Congress and one to the Senate or something. It's crazy. Anyway, overall, Trump is absolutely losing more than he did last. What's he down? He's almost down 3%. Actually, he's down 3%. Not quite, 2.8%. You have to forgive me. It's been eyeballing you since your first video. Nerd, absolutely. I've been watching these numbers like a hawk. I have had so many late nights over this. The first night, I've got to admit, it looked kind of like a Trump, was going to take it again. He took Florida, and even though it looked like he was on track to take Florida, Arizona was going the wrong way. And by the time I got up the next day, even though all of these states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, the blue wall, even though they were all trending, even though they were all slightly red, everyone knew, even back then, that these things were going to go blue. And that's why Trump was all about stop the count. Can I interview you on my channel? Yeah, I guess. Mr. Garden. I'll look into that later. Yeah, thank God for the libertarians splitting the right. Did the libertarians split the right? And this is the thing, right? If I am going to look at this at the simplest level, this is an absolute godsend, because for the last 4 years I've had to deal with the most obnoxious Trump supporters, who have basically followed every move, where I've even put in the slightest criticism of Trump, saying, "You're just salty that you lost." Now, it would take a great man to not repay that in kind. I am not a great man. I might be okay. Right, this is one of those, what's it called? Firefly. There's this bit where Mal defeats the bad guy in fencing. And he says, "Mercy is the sign of a great man." And then he stabs him. And he says, "Well, I'm not a great man." And then he stabs him again, and he says, "Well, I guess I'm just okay." And that's kind of where I am with this. Yeah, it's cannabis-based channel. I've never actually done anything other than maybe a little bit of whiskey and coke. I've never done cannabis in my life. Isn't Trump good for the EU? Right. The simple reality is, whilst this is absolutely glorious for drinking the tears of the okay, let's just be blunt for a moment. Drinking the tears of Trump tards. My God. Thank you, Nays, for the support. Whilst this election has been absolutely glorious for drinking the tears of Trump tards, in terms of practical differences, I don't think this is going to make a lot of difference, right? The main difference is that you won't have a retard tweeting from the toilet at 6 o'clock every morning and dominating the news cycle with it. Biden better do a good job, because Trump will be back in 2024. I'll bet he's not. I will. No, right. So this is the thing. I sit here as someone who had this discussion. This person who is an American, who had lived in America for all of their lives, they were telling me that they hoped that Trump got the nomination, because there was no way that America would vote for Trump as president. And there was me saying, look, we both watched America elect Bush for a second time. What makes you think that they won't go for Trump? However, now Trump has been rejected once, and also you have to bear in mind that even if, right, I made a couple of predictions, one of which was that America would hit 100,000 infections by election day. Reported cases per day by election day of coronavirus. Now, I was actually wrong. They didn't do that. It took 2 more days for it to do that. And in fact, if you actually take a look at the averages, it was basically spot on. But America is 120,000 coronavirus cases today, right? Which means that Trump is going to be president for the next 3 months. It's going to be a disaster in America for 3 months. So I was having this discussion with all these people at work. Okay, let's just say for sake of argument that he loses. What happens next? And I can't see him conceding graciously, because that's just not in his character. The idea that he's going to drop that in favor of competently managing the coronavirus is an absolute non-starter. This is just never going to happen. In all likelihood, basically everyone is left to fend for themselves in the States for the next 3 months. And you just take a look at the 3 last spikes, right? By the time you're ramping up, you can maybe, you could maybe double this, right? Historically, between when you take action and when you hit the top is about a factor of 2. So if you take a lockdown in Europe now, let's take a look at the UK. Oh God, this is what gets me. You take a look at all these places. Where is China on this list now? The China virus. Well, there's 10 million cases in America, lots of places with 1 million cases, and you have to go a long way down. There's China, 90,000. All right, they are a authoritarian dictatorship, and they stamped on all sorts of civil liberties to actually shut down the virus. But the bottom line is they shut down the virus. Meanwhile, what do you have in America? This is the same timescale that we're looking at here. It's just gone up and up and up. This is not what I was going to show you. Sorry, I got distracted. I wanted to show you, typically you lock down about here, and then it doubles before you get to the top. And likewise, with most places in Europe, they've sort of, everywhere in Europe is basically locked down at the moment. And so this is the coast to the peak, which is like a factor of 2 up or something. And if you take a look at America, this is where it gets kind of grim, right? All right, you're at 1,000-ish dead now. So even if people take serious action now, you're looking at cruising to probably 2,000 dead per day. This is the best case scenario for the coronavirus. And what is Trump doing in the meantime? Is he taking he's not even mentioned that. I mean, you took a look at his rallies. What was he going to do? Once he had won re-election, he was going to fire Fauci. He had his rallies where he's sitting there all smug. They're chanting fire Fauci, and it's like, well, let's just wait till a little bit after the election before we do that. This guy's mind isn't anywhere close to the coronavirus at the moment. It's only on trying to win re-election, and it's just not happening. Nevada is almost certainly gone. Georgia, 99%. This is a wafer thin margin, by the way. It's 0.1%. But basically, I think Biden only needs Nevada and Georgia and Trump can't win anymore. There is no path to victory. There is only a path to a tie. In reality, Pennsylvania is going to go a couple of percent in favor of, well, at least 1% in favor of Biden. And Arizona looks to be going that way as well. At which point there is basically no path to victory for the man who defines absolutely everything about himself as it's about winning. And it's about selling that you're winning. But in fact, that's been his entire sales pitch with the coronavirus, is that we're winning. There's a cruise ship with a lot of sick people who want to come on board. Well, I like the numbers where they are. So let's not get these people to get off the cruise ship because that'll inflate our coronavirus numbers. Yeah, I mean, he was constantly trying to get the numbers down. We have a super chat that comes in. Even in China, even if China is lying, it's hard to cover up millions of cases, and this is basically true. You have to bear in mind that at the end of all of this, China had this massive party in Wuhan, which a lot of people viewed as, China kind of giving everyone the finger because they had done something good and everyone else was still suffering. But the simple reality was you can't have these massive open-air festivals if you've still got the coronavirus because it's... Otherwise, you end up with the refrigerator trucks, to bury the dead. So yeah, I just don't see that there was, even if China downplayed it, and I'm not so sure they did, because I looked at the numbers. I looked at the numbers from mid-February, and from mid-February, I had 2 weeks of numbers from China, and from that you extrapolated a spread rate which fitted everywhere else in the world. And at that point, really, what are they preemptively meant to be predicting that everyone else is going to suffer really badly from this, but we want to downplay our numbers somewhat because reasons? I mean, if you're the only person in the world who has coronavirus cases, what do you actually gain by? There's no other country for you to benchmark against. If, as it was the case, China had tens of thousands of dead versus Italy, which had 20. What's the point in covering up at this point? They made it clear enough. They gave the correct spread rate. They gave the virus genome. Arguably early on they maybe didn't act so well. Yeah, this I can quite happily give, but let's just put this in any other country in the world. Would any other country in the world have acted so would any other country in the world have actually shut it down so quickly? Yeah, I mean, me too. I never understood the sort of paranoia about blaming China, especially now, right? Let's make China, 100 times worse. Let's say there's 100 times more fatalities in China than there really were. China had 4,000 dead in total, I think. Now let's take a look at the worldwide death toll. Is like 1 million. So even if China was underreporting by a factor of 100, which no one can sensibly say that they were, everyone across the world, when they come to reporting these numbers, there's been this, they're underreporting it to make themselves look good. So with America, you take a look at the excess deaths versus the number reported by COVID, and they're underreported by about 30%. That's the way it goes across most of Europe as well. And a lot of this is maybe real, that, if you just report the people who have lung infections who are dying of, so coronavirus-related stuff, then maybe you get the coronavirus numbers. The extra 30% you get from basically clogging up all of your hospitals with people who have coronavirus. There's almost, early on, it was all about basically we have to inflate China's numbers. China is covering it up, and therefore our numbers aren't so bad. But now you take a look at America's numbers of infected. 9 million, 10 million. Let's not split hairs here. America has 10 million. China had 100,000 cases. You're looking at a factor of 100 there. Okay? China has basically reopened again. I mean, America is under no even slight illusions that this is remotely under control. Anyway, this was all a bit of a tangent. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on one on this, but I predicted that it would be 100,000 by election day for America, and it only got up to 98,000. It's now 130, but we're the best part of a week on 130, 120, 120,000. There we go. And we're coming up for winter. Now, I've not actually broken that down by state yet, so I got kind of distracted by the election. Terrible, I know. But yeah, the sad reality is, even though that this will be a blowout in terms of who wins the electoral college, it's very, very clear that there is a lot of, right? There was a clip, which everyone must have seen, of basically sore loser from Trump 2016. And let me see if I can pull up almost exactly the same clip from this news cycle. Is it this one? No. Just give me a second. No. There is this guy at a Trump rally, and he absolutely loses it. Let's just try Trump supporter loses it. And let's try video. Sorry, I had all of this lined up, and it's showing me stuff from a long time ago. That's no good. Anyway, he basically comes up behind a guy counting votes in Nevada, I think, and claims that the Biden crime family is stealing the election. At which point, you just sort of scratch your head, and it's like, hang on, Sleepy Joe is the head of a crime family now? Sleepy crime family steals the election? On different bloody sides of America, in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in Arizona, in Nevada. Like I said, I've lived in a lot of places in America. I've driven through Pennsylvania. Is kind of an interesting place. Appalachians run all the way through it. For the large part, I only ever drove through a little bit in the corner. But the idea that someone has masterminded election rigging in different sides of the continent just like this is kind of dumb when you only have to do it in Pennsylvania and Florida. It's sneezing again. It always goes in threes. So, something I always wanted to know is why... Oh no, I'm just not going to go for 4, is it? Don't go for 4. Don't ruin... Beautiful. Now I feel a little better. Right, so sneezes almost always go in threes, which I've never really understood. Um, let's try Nevada. Let's see if we can actually find our man losing it in Nevada. It's a terrible thing the way that results are filtered these days. I mean, part of me sort of says, yeah, okay, it does kind of stop the crazy from spreading. But, you know, if you're now going to get pangs of guilt about this, what is it? The most popular religion on the planet believes that we're all doomed because a ribble woman, oh god, a ribble woman, just needs a little more. Because a ribble woman from a dirt man was convinced by a talking snake to eat a magic fruit, and that's why we're all doomed. That's the most popular religion on the planet. Catholicism. Oh, and that you can be absolved from this sin by eating magical wafers dipped in red wine, which become the flesh and blood of a 2,000-year-old zombie. And if you eat those, you'll be absolved of the sins of Dirt Man and Rib Woman. Anyway, yeah, the very original fake news. I am so disappointed that I've actually managed to lose. I had it all queued up and ready to go. This absolutely crazy guy. Oh wow, just look at all those comments go. Okay, yeah. Dirt Man, Rib Woman. Ah, that's Tattoo. Yeah. I kind of like listening to Tattoo. They do good dancey type music. Let's try this again. What do I want? I think it's Nevada Trump supporter. But it is almost the perfect... There we go. I have him. I have you now, young Jedi. Okay, so this should hopefully play through. No, we don't want you. We don't want you. We don't want any bloody commercials. Yeah, here we go. Hopefully you can see this now. Okay. I sincerely hope you got all of that. I'm sorry. I am so boomering out at the moment. But that was basically a Trump supporter absolutely losing it, saying that it's all a conspiracy by the Biden crime family. Not quite gathering that the messaging had been that it was Sleepy Joe. Sleepy Joe, not crime family Joe. And you take a step back, and it's even crazier than that, because you get these Republican guys down in Arizona saying, count the vote, count the vote. They're going to do 3-word chants, by the way. It's just one of those sad things. 3 words is their absolute limit. If they do more than 3 words, they forget the name of their mother or something. Anyway, so it's count the vote in Arizona, and it was stop the count in Pennsylvania. And how do these people walk and chew gum at the same time? Anyway, yeah. So I've lost the chat again. I've lost you, chat. Where are you? There's too many computers here. There we go. Hello. What? No sound. drag him out. Okay, 3-word chance. There was no sound on the video. No! Okay, hang on. What? Seriously? There was no sound? I'm sorry. Okay, let me give you the overdub of what was actually going on there. Let me just see if I can get it back again. Yeah, here we go. I'm sorry, I started this just a little bit drunk, so I might not be able... thank you for the support there on the super chat. Okay, here we go. Right, so... Yeah, you're right, there is no sound on it. Damn! What the fuck's wrong with you? It was working earlier. Okay, this is dub. The Biden election was stolen. The Biden crime family is stealing the election. It's stealing the election. And I don't know what this guy's doing. He's just sort of standing there saying, I'm sorry, my hearing aid batteries are all flat. You're gonna have to shout a little louder there, mate. And then he just sort of loses it and walks off. And then this guy, who is just like the guy who counts ballots, the most dullest, most boring job in the world, and he's out there sort of saying, yeah, we've been counting ballots today. And then this guy comes on who is like 1 degree detached from they're doing an alien autopsy on Sleepy Joe, and starts shouting. And after this guy runs out of steam with all his shouting, this guy just continues on like nothing happened. So, okay, I gave you my best overdub of that. I'm sorry that the audio failed like that. But yeah, this is what you need to look for, is Trump supporter interrupts briefing about ballot count. Let's see if we can zoom out so you actually get the... There we go. You do a search for that, and it is absolutely epic. Yeah, my live dubbing of audio fails. Incidentally, by the way, this over here, these are my imidazolium crystals. But the thing that's really amazing about the imidazolium crystals is they're actually in the cap of a Coke bottle. If he was a lib, he would have met a taser / mace. So, I mean, this is the thing. It is almost beat for beat. There was this very social justice warrior looking fat man / woman / feminist, whatever. And when Trump got inaugurated, they come out with this, no! And this was beat for beat the exact same thing, apart from with a redneck. And yeah, it's quite entertaining, doing the rounds on the news media. And that's the one nice thing, right? So it must be said, for years, every time that I try to make a sensible argument about Trump, I actually say, for instance, being an anti-vaxxer for years before he was into the birtherism, or, making his inquiries into 9/11 or whatever. People would just say, Trump delusion syndrome, you've not gotten over the loss of the last election. And it's one of those things that, in terms of derailing a conversation, there you are trying to actually make a coherent argument, and it's instantly derailed with the most simple and primal of human emotions, that you're just bitter because you lost. And now it's glorious, because all of those people have been shut down in a fucking nanosecond because of these election results. Now all of a sudden, you don't turn up here anymore because you're just bitter you lost. And it doesn't matter how coherent the arguments that they make would be, because you can just... I mean, for me, I kind of absolutely hate it. But, you got to see it from my point of view. For the last 4 years, it was just a bloody nightmare. Anyway, that being said, the number of intellectual arguments that ever came beyond "you're just bitter" were non-existent. They were basically, I would make my argument, and they would say "you're bitter," and that was it. They never actually presented any argument why I was wrong or anything like that. It was an intellectual vacuum. So hopefully we can move a little bit beyond that. In reality, it's not going to make any difference because you come back to the map. Even though Biden is going to be the next president, it looks like the Republicans will hold the Senate. And you only have to take a look, track record, the past is prologue or something like that. And they absolutely shut down everything in the Senate. No, not in the Senate. Everything in the legislative process. All the time Obama was president, they absolutely stonewalled him from doing anything. And there is no reason to believe that they're not going to do exactly the same now. That being said, it's one of these weird things that America is kind of on borrowed time, in that it's been over a millennium now since the Republicans won the popular vote. Right? They've essentially survived through narrow paths to the Electoral College. And there's another sort of quirk that all of these states up here, all of these states put together, Montana, population of about 1 million, North and South Dakota about 1 million a shot, Wyoming 500,000, Idaho also about 1 million, Nebraska about 1 million. All of these solid red Republican states have less population than New York City, but are 1/10 of the entire Senate, something like that. And yeah, I mean, when we come to SCROTUS, the SCROTUSes that have been appointed by Trump, those go on for a generation. The Supreme Court nominations are lifetime appointments, and there's only 9 of them. I mean, it's always kind of dumb that, when you come to try to explain this to a foreigner, that it's 9 people who are the ultimate arbiters of all of your justice, and they're appointed, they're nominated by the president, appointed by everyone else. 9 is small number statistics. Especially if they're going to go down partisan lines that, they're either going to be Republican or Democrat. I mean, the whole thing seems to have been, for certainly as long as I ever remember it, there's only one issue that the Supreme Court matters for, and that's Roe versus Wade. And this goes to the deeply religious roots of America, particularly the deeply religious roots of, the Bible Belt, a bit across the middle here. They all want abortion to be illegal, which is a very fine, ethical position. It's just not one that works out very practically in society, in that America tried outlawing abortion and alcohol, for that matter, for a little while. And it turns out that if you try and outlaw things that people want to do, it just doesn't work out that well. So, they outlawed prohibition, and it just established the largest bootlegging criminal enterprise in history. Because it turns out people kind of like drinking. And actually now, there have been loads of people who legalized all sorts of drugs across the states. I'm sure someone will tell me in a short while just how many places have legalized recreational marijuana. And there have even been states that have been, I think it's Oregon legalized hard drugs. And there's a fairly decent argument for it in that, first of all, you strip out all the legs from the organised crime that goes with it. And, you get to put taxes on the drugs that you sell. And there are people who abuse drugs on all sorts of tiers in society. And arguably, it's the people who have the mix of a sort of compulsive, obsessive disorder and drugs. This is a bad combination. But this, there have been people who function. Churchill was what you would call a functioning alcoholic. I am in no position to say anything about this at the moment, but okay. Churchill was a functioning alcoholic and still went on to be written up as the greatest Antifa member in history. Because if you think about it, is there anyone who was more anti-fascist than Churchill? Sorry, Churchill. There we go. Yeah. Churchill was the greatest anti-fascist in history, with the possible exception of Roosevelt. Yeah. Trump hump. Yeah, best laugh. Yeah, I mean, for me too, right? The reason that I've been so glued to these numbers up here for the last few days, and I've got to admit, there were times when I was like, this is kind of a toss-up. When Florida lost, it's like, this is bad. Then when Michigan and Wisconsin swung back, you had a reasonable idea that Pennsylvania, also the Rust Belt, they're common cultures, these guys up here. It was sort of expected that Pennsylvania would come back. It took 2 bloody days for it to do it, but it did it. And then you come over to the other side of the country. Nevada was kind of expected. Arizona wasn't. So, yeah, I mean, the coastal areas here are, they're starting to have their voices heard. Churchill defeated the Nazis in hopes of furthering the British Empire. Damn straight he did. For those who don't know, the history of World War II is nowhere near as black and white as people would want it to be. It was by no means goodies and baddies. Almost no one operated on sheer virtue. Almost the nearest that you can get to virtue, if you can call it, is when Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany. And this was basically after France had fallen. Britain stood alone. It took the Blitz. But even at that, you could argue that, what options did Churchill have? The choice is, he'd basically gone all in on fight. And you take a look at the early military operations of the Allies, and they're all basically a disaster. I mean, the France campaign didn't go well at all. Then there was the Norway campaign. That was another disaster. And there was a year when Britain was just about hanging in there. And that was before the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and it genuinely became a world war at that point. But even back then, not a lot of people know this, but Churchill goes all the way back to World War I. He was pure establishment, and pure establishment with a history of military adventurism. He was he was First Lord of the Admiralty. You'll have to check me on this, but during Gallipoli, and Gallipoli was a disaster in World War One, and that kind of got him, kicked down the ranks a bit. And then, he comes back, and he's going to do World War Two, and a bit of a gambler, and yeah, I mean, if this is another bizarre thing. If Hitler hadn't been such a gambler, he would have done nowhere near as well as he actually did do. So when the Germans invaded France, people give the French all sorts of crap about cheese-eating surrender monkeys, which is funny, but not terribly accurate. It's like this sort of, you're just salty about losing type thing. It's a good, snappy retort. It gets people where they feel it. But is it actually accurate? Not greatly. Because let me just see if let's lose our Trump supporter for the moment, and let's go for Google Maps. I don't know what's on the maps, but we're going to take a look at it. I've got no idea what this place is. Where the hell am I? Who the hell is this guy? Just for ladies. I have got no idea what the. Where the hell is this place? I'm Casey's. It's in Buffalo. What the fuck? Seriously? Right. So I have never actually been in Buffalo in my life. Come on, I want to zoom out. Take me up to the sky. I want to go up to the sky. Okay, there we go. Satellite. There we go. Perfect. I have no idea where this is. Where are we? Keeney? The hell are we? Nebraska. Okay, I know where we are now. Right, so I was actually doing the last time I was searching for this. I was saying this was before the election, and I was telling people that there is absolutely nothing in Nebraska. There is this one interstate that goes through Nebraska, and no one ever stops or does anything in Nebraska. Apart from there is this one place, which is where we were just at, where there is a bridge over the interstate in Nebraska, and it's just like you drive for hours and hours and hours, and there is a bridge over and there is no need for there to be a bridge, right? It doesn't matter where you are in Nebraska, the view is the same. It is the massive flatlands, right down to all of the dead insects on the Google camera, right? So this is I remember driving across Nebraska, and there's nothing to do. There is nothing to do. The traffic density on the freeway is non-existent, right? You set your cruise control. You can drive for half an hour without overtaking anyone or being overtaken by anyone or something like that. Until in the middle of Nebraska, there is just this bridge over the freeway. And that's exactly where we were then. Anyway, that's not why I wanted this. I wanted to go to the satellite. And the reason I wanted the satellite is not so we can look at Nebraska, but so we can actually take a look at what Germany did in World War II. And it's basically, they were on this border here. This is the Ardennes. And they push through and they do this lightning advance across here. Once you get through all this hilly region here, it's basically a free drive to the sea. And it turns out there are two things that really helped them out here. The German tanks took gasoline, which you could actually just, right? Slight warning, the Germans might be preparing to invade it, is they ordered like 1 million Michelin guides to France. Right? And when they did that, they knew where all the gas stations were. So basically, the tanks of Germany could be tanked up with gasoline at the French gas stations, and that helped them to drive all the way to the sea. But you take a look at the distances here, right? Or, I mean, hell, this is 100 kilometers. Let me see if I can get this all on the screen for you. This is 100 kilometers. So, you know, they're only talking... Yeah, the maximum distance to Paris here is a couple of 100 kilometers. Doesn't matter if you don't know what kilometers are. We'll take a look at something else on the same scale in a second. But, you know, the advance to the coast here was only a couple of 100 kilometers. You take a look at this in American terms. A couple of hundred... what were we at? Let's put that same... Oh, actually, we'll put it on Nebraska. Yeah, so it's about 200 kilometers is my guess, is the drive to the ocean. And so it's about the drive from New York to Washington, right? So and you have basically the time it takes someone to drive from New York to Washington to stop an army. And yeah, the distance is tiny. And also, to put this into perspective, what stopped the Germans was, you know, this is Germany here. Then you go through Poland, Belarus, Ukraine, this sort of crap, and you get to Moscow. There, Moscow's... Where the fuck is Moscow? My Russian is not so good. I thought Moscow was about there somewhere. I'm not seeing Moscow. Anyway, there's not a lot here anyway. So Moscow is... Seriously? You're not going to tell me where Moscow is, Google Maps? I have got this right, haven't I? I'm not like miles out or something. Right, okay. Let's be bold. Moscow. Okay, that's not going to work. Moscow. There we go. There we go. Moscow. Super. So there's Moscow. And this is 1,000 kilometers, right? This is 1,000 kilometers. So to go from Germany to Moscow, you're looking at 1,000 to 2,000 kilometers. Right? Now, the German invasion force, when they got them, they were about here somewhere, you know, somewhat inside Poland, and there were about 3 million people. So 3 million people, that's 3 decent-sized cities. And you had, even if you just look at the logistics of moving those 3 million people out to this sort of arc here, this is a monstrous operation. So I'm going to keep the scale exactly the same here, and we're going to take that distance there and see how much that is on America. And it's about basically taking the entire of 3 million person cities on the East Coast here and moving them to the middle of America. It's a monstrous logistical operation, even if there aren't people there trying to kill you, which of course there were. And this was all done before computer logistics or anything. So what happened is they got about kind of up to this sort of line here-ish, this line here. And at that point, their logistics, it was a combination of the logistics died. Comment, I feel I should contribute something. Thank you, John. Much appreciated. Watching the videos for over 10 years. Glad you enjoyed the videos. The Germans got up to about this line here, and they basically ran out of steam in that the Russians had been fairly successfully trying to kill them. They'd basically destroyed the frontline strength of the army by the time they got to this line here. In the year after they invaded Russia, they got all the way down into the Caucasus here, and there's this epic battle in Stalingrad, which was basically a complete turning point for the war. Last supper before I go back to work. Leave it to Trump to be a whiny man baby and delay the inevitable. Yes, I mean, but that's in many ways, this is where... Okay, I know I should be the bigger man here. I know I should be a... Yeah, okay, let's just leave it as a better man. But it's so tempting to savor the tears of the trumpetards. Tastes good. Anyway, yeah, and this thing, right? Previously, in the comments, there would always be the lowest common denominator. You're just bitter that you lost. It feels good. It feels good that I don't have to put up with that shit anymore. Anyway, where was I? Okay, so the first year, Germany did very well. And they got up to about here, and, you know, after they'd had their frontline strength destroyed, the Russians actually had a reasonable go at destroying the front, because the way that the war was basically fought at this point, when Napoleon invaded, he basically marched an army to Moscow. This was different. When the Germans did it, they actually had a front. So this is the thing, virtually all of your troops are on the front. If you lose your troops on the front, that's it. The war's kind of done, because then all people do is they drive their military forces into your country, and it's over. So in the winter, the Germans only just managed to hold it together. And then in the summertime, they managed to get this next new offensive, which did spectacularly well, got into the Caucasus here, pushed all the way to Volgograd. There we go. Volgograd, also known as Stalingrad. And glad that the information helped out with the first telescope. And if you ever want, in many ways, they're some of the most I'm not quite sure what the word to use is, but they are some of the most human stories from the Germans that got trapped in Stalingrad. Because you got to bear in mind that, yeah, with all of these things, there are the people who are devoted to the cause. These, in more modern times, would be the people who would support Trump even if he shot someone in Fifth Avenue. The facts aren't really that important to them. And there were people like that in the German army. But there were also a lot of, the bulk of the German army was more normal people. Yeah, if anything, the only message that people ever ought to be taught about World War II is that Germany, prior to World War II, was it was one of the most modern countries on the planet. It was a Christian country, and if you can get the point where you go from that to mechanized genocide in 4 years, why can't it happen anywhere else? That's the almost right. Basically, that's the most important lesson from World War II. But there are also some very human things that come out of it. And that's the German army. Once they'd actually got to Volgograd, Stalingrad, and they were right on the absolute limit of their strength, out pushing into the Caucasus here. And they didn't realize it, but the Russians were actually doing fairly well at the time. There was the Persian Road. They're being supplied by the Americans, most importantly with trucks. And they were amassing tanks on both sides of Stalingrad. And in one very quick movement, they basically cut off Stalingrad. And the people in Stalingrad, this is Russia in the winter. If you don't have fuel, you freeze to death. If you don't have food, you starve to death. And this happens very quickly. I mean, so once they were cut off, it was in the Sixth Army. It was the Sixth Army in Stalingrad, and this was the absolute cream of Germany. It was the best army that they had. This was the army that, I mean, if you take a look at how far they'd gone, I mean, it's fairly impressive. But, this was the army that Hitler had boasted could storm the heavens. This was sort of instrumental in the conquest of France, just a year to 2 years ago. And they're cut off in the middle of Russia, right? No food, no fuel. And it turns out it's even worse than that, because they were in a city that had been bombed to bits. And when they'd bombed it to bits, all of the stuff that would burn had been burned. So they had no fuel and no food. And there was a rescue attempt launched I'm trying to remember, is it Winter Storm, was it? Winter Storm. It was a Manstein came up from the south, and they got within, the Germans in the city, they were stuck there, right? They could see the flashes of light from all the gunfire at night, and they could hear the roar of guns, but it was about 30 miles away, right? Too far. You can't just walk out 30 miles in Russia in the winter. You freeze to death. And then Manstein's push is repelled, and these guys left in the pocket, 250,000 people. It's basically they slowly freeze and starve to death. And even there's 250,000 people, and I forget, it's something like 6,000 of them survive Russian captivity. So it's 250,000 cut off, and there's a typhoid epidemic afterwards, and they're all basically starved on the edge of death anyway by the time they surrender. But just so you know, it's if you take a look at some of the interviews of the people who were in the Kessel, that's the German word for the cauldron, the people who were stuck in Stalingrad, there was no hope of survival. You were basically surrounded in Russia. The Russians didn't really even need to do anything. Basically, you just left them to starve. But then they were after they were marched off to camp. There was a typhoid epidemic, and it's virtually no one survived. But you take it, if you feel bad for them, things to bear in mind that when Germany first invaded all of these portions of Russia, they took loads of prisoners. And the survival rate on those prisoners was also like 3% or something. They would basically get all the prisoners, put them in camps, and give them 1/10 of what they actually needed to survive. So the survival rates on the Russian prisoners was abysmal. So looked at like that, it's difficult to feel sorry for. They kind of got what they were giving, but nonetheless, it's when you actually see some of the interviews of these guys, they're like old men, remembering what it was like for them when they were 20, and they were sat out there in the middle of bloody Russia, freezing, absolutely freezing. And, watching the flashes of light from the guns, hour by hour, retreating backwards. You can empathize with these people. Hey mate, you're obviously a keen interest in the knowledge in wars. Yes. Enjoyed the tanks video. Would be keen to hear more. What about Churchill being virtuous in his motives? So it's one of these things that to be sort of famous in history you've not just got to have the right motives, you've got to win as well. Actually, not entirely true. The 300 Spartans, there were the so glorious failures, the charge of the Light Brigade, which when I was a kid, charge of the Light Brigade had all sorts of connotations of space. The light brigade, it was like lightsabers and blasters and all that sort of thing. No, the Light Brigade was basically because they didn't have heavy armor, they had light armor. And they were basically a bunch of guys on swords. And it was an entire British cock-up, the charge of the Light Brigade. And this, for some bizarre reason, is written up as some great and noble chapter in British history, as the charge of the Light Brigade, regaled in song, that into the Valley of Death rode the 500, I think it was. And the Light Brigade were ordered accidentally. It was a communications cock-up. The Light Brigade were ordered to charge against some fortified position or some shit like that. And they did it. And they all got killed. And this is seen as some great chapter in British history because they were so loyal that they charged a weak unit against a heavily fortified position. It's like, what? Really? Really? I mean, this is like sort of glorifying people for commanding them to fall on their sword and then having them fall on their sword and saying, yeah, look how gloriously loyal these people are. Anyway, so that was the sort of thing that I grew up being told was a great sacrifice when I was a kid. For me, it kind of reminded me of Abraham. Right? So all throughout your youth, I was told the story of Abraham and how wonderfully loyal this man was to God. He was so wonderfully loyal to God that when God came and told him to kill his own son, he said, yeah, right, let me get some binding and a knife. And he was just about to kill his son, and God stops him. And it's like, isn't the moral of this story Abraham was a psychopath? And it's like, no, Abraham is the great core religious figure who is the center of all of the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, because of his great sacrifice that he was willing to kill his own son. Be interesting to hear what your views on humans stopping and reversing climate change are. Okay, so let me tell you about how screwed we are on climate change. If there is one lesson that we have learned from the coronavirus, is that mankind simply cannot operate until there is a clear and present danger, until you actually see the cases spiking. I mean, throughout the whole of bloody Europe, right? United Kingdom, right? So I've been following UK fairly closely. And even though the cases spiked massively, the deaths didn't quite spike in unison. And so there were people saying that, yeah, it's not a problem. It's not as fatal anymore. Everyone's got it. We've got herd immunity already. And of course, you take a look a week or two later. In fact, let me see if I can pull this up. What do we want? We want worldometer. And we want the deaths in the UK. No, we don't want that. We want worldometer, coronavirus. Okay, let's go for the UK. There we go. Super. So coming down to the UK, the cases spiked up and they were saying, yeah, but deaths didn't really do the same. And it was true that for a long time, that's daily cases, daily deaths. For a long time, deaths lagged. It's like a couple of, 20 deaths per day, that's nothing. Right? Why are we getting all worried about this? And the simple answer is because viruses are viral. Right? It's one of those things you can get lots of people dying from smoking, but you're never going to get 10 times that number of dying, or 100 times, or 1,000 times. You can do that with a virus. You can't do it with smoking. And so, this, by the way, for those who haven't been paying attention, the ramp up on the second wave everywhere it's like the first wave on slow motion, right? So it looks like everything is in slow motion for the second wave. I don't know why. It's just the way the patterns that I've observed. Anyway, for a long time, people were saying, yeah, look, there's no deaths from the second wave. Why are we bothering? Well, now the deaths are in the UK up at, let's say 300 per day, whereas at their maximum, they're about 600 per day. Right? So it's not looking good for the UK. And for the US, I've not looked at the US for a day or two. Been kind of preoccupied with the election and all that sort of stuff. So let's see how the US is doing. Lots of stuff on the States. Oh, okay. So that's daily cases. I predicted, I missed it by a whisker that it would be over 100,000 by election day. It's 120 now. So if you plot at the average, it's probably about right. But if you take a look at the deaths, this is the total deaths. It's kind of a straight line, which means your deaths per day is fairly linear. But this is starting to ramp up. And this ramp up is what you've seen throughout Europe. So basically the deaths will follow the cases. And so America is likely to more or less double its daily cases from about 50,000 to 100,000. This might actually go up to 150,000. You're looking at deaths per day probably doubling from here. You can't. The thing is, comparing here to here is difficult because the detection was poor here. It's probably you only detected a small number of the coronavirus cases here. So this first wave should have actually, let's come back here. This first wave should have been 5 times higher. And then it's coming down, and this is now more or less accurate. So the thing is, you can't double right? There are all these people saying that it's all down to detection. We're doing more tests, therefore we're getting more cases. This is bollocks. You've basically doubled the detection here. The detection here and the detection here is very different. The detection here and the detection here is comparable. So basically, you've more or less doubled the number of cases that you're getting per day. You're more or less going to double the cases. So you're probably at 700 at the moment in America, probably going to go up to 1,500, maybe more if things go badly. But coming back to global warming, this is global warming on steroids. You can see it right in front of your eyes from day to day. When it comes to global warming, you basically run into what I'm going to call the Steven Crowder syndrome, where he will make a video in the hottest month in history, in the hottest year in history, saying that global warming is that there'll be the whole gamut, the whole spectrum of reasons why you don't have to worry about this. Let's just take a look at top 10 hottest years. Top 10 hottest. You're going to get some interesting things there. Okay, top 10 hottest Pepper's anime guys, models, Bollywood actresses, anime characters, actresses in India. This is not years in history, right? I can tell you with absolute certainty that of the things that that is not a tailored search, because the number of times that I've searched the top 10 hottest years in history blows the crap out of all of the others. Anyway, there you go. So, I mean, you get a whole host of things like this. And you take a look at the top 10 hottest years in history, and they're basically all the last decade, right? It's that straightforward. Or if you take a look at global temperature. Let's try global temperature. There you go. That's how the autocomplete works with me. Yeah. And yeah, I remember Steven Crowder, when he was making his video saying that it's all a scam, it's all a hoax. There's been no global warming for 20 years. You know, it's basically you say, well, let's draw a line across here. And, well, yeah, but those were still the hottest years on record. And in many ways, right, the temperature itself, not such a problem. Yeah, if you're just looking in terms of Thunderfoot, here in South Carolina, for your hard work. Oh, thank you. South Carolina. I hate to say it, but weren't they? Okay, weren't they one of the ones in? Oh no, it's North Carolina. North Carolina was one of the ones in play. And they've not counted any votes. They've been at 94. Oh no, they're 99 now. Okay, that's kind of a done deal. Okay, North Carolina goes to Trump. Oh, it's more than 1 part in 1,000 now. In favor of Biden. Pennsylvania. Yeah, Pennsylvania, I suspect, is going to go like 1%. This is the point. You can't once they get beyond about 1%, you can't really claim it's margin of error how you'll count the votes or something. Trump is doing more stop the ballot count than he's done stop COVID. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is what blows my mind about Trump. Is America is the only country on the planet that never actually really got the first wave under control. Everywhere else in the world managed to get this to go back almost down to 0. And then there was 0, 0, 0, and then there was a second wave. Right? You take a look at any other bloody country on the planet. Actually, not true for the Middle East. Middle East was not so good. Thank you, Vlad. Yeah, so you take a look at the UK. And yeah, for the summer, it was hugely under control. And in many ways, this is probably the reason why it's all gone so badly ever since, is that this basically convinced people in their minds that the coronavirus wasn't a thing anymore. So let's go to Italy. Yeah, Italy. There we go. Super. And Italy. So America is not unique in this wave here, but America was unique in the wave in the middle. Yeah. And the sad thing is, you take a look at people's efforts to control this, and there's a gazillion of these people saying that it's all fake news, that there is video. I'll put up a video of it tomorrow on this channel about there are these people saying there is no such thing as the coronavirus. It's like, what the hell are you on? 1 million people have died from it. Yeah, thanks, Jesslyn. Here's to you too. But yeah, there is no reason whatsoever why this couldn't have been contained or at least handled much better in America. And this is the thing, if you actually kill the virus off here, like this, then it's much easier to contain later on. So with the UK, right, this is where the UK really screwed up. Hindsight's always 20/20, but in this case, not so much. It's the UK could have done a sort of, right, from this very moment that you see an uptick, right? It seems like nothing, right? Well, what are we worried about? We've had these sorts of cases all along. Well, not so much. What you got to bear in mind is the detection was much poorer here, and it's much better here. So in reality, this bit where it looks flat is actually slowly going down. But once you get to this little uptick here, This is the bit where the UK should have done its circuit breaker lockdown, right? Because if you'd have done it there, then this would have gone up to about here and gone back down again. The mere fact that the UK said, well, we're not going to circuit breaker here, we're going to do regional lockdowns. And by the time they were doing regional lockdowns, it was up here. And then they were debating about level 1, 2, and 3 lockdowns, and it was up here. And then they decided, okay, finally, we're going to do a countrywide lockdown. And even at the countrywide lockdown, I mean, we're still talking people go to work. It's just that they basically close shops and that sort of thing. So if they'd have done it earlier, the circuit breaker back here made sense. If you do it here, it really doesn't make a lot of sense because a circuit breaker basically brings you back down to this level, the level that you were before the circuit breaker. Well, if you do that now, you're still going to get 24,000 cases per day. It's pointless. What the hell are you doing? Which to a very large degree, what's happening in America is just being completely swamped by the elections at the moment. Brooker, hey, make nice NMR machines. John, just remember how stupid the average person is. To remember half of them are dumber than that. George Carlin, quote, for the win. I mean, where is America going to go here? What you got to bear in mind is this is an exponent. And if you don't take efforts to control the exponent, it's just going to keep going, right? So someone's got to do something at some point. I've not broken this down by state yet. If I remember rightly, it's like Wisconsin or something was really bad. New York. I know a guy in New York who actually had the coronavirus and almost died from it. And he works at a university where they're taking, now everyone gets tested. Everyone gets tasted once per week for the coronavirus. Because everyone likes being tasted. Anyway, did the circuit breaker here, and they forced the kids, so it's completely safe. What are your thoughts on South Africa? Well, it depends on what part of the history of South Africa we're looking at here. Let's see if we can actually go to South Africa. Right, so South Africa, strategically really important because in the good old days you had to go around the Cape to go anywhere. And so there were all sorts of European powers who wanted spices of one sort or another from India and China, and so you had to basically control South Africa. The thing was, the people who was colonized by, I can't even remember who, but the apartheid system. Basically, they had the two-tier thing that, in fact, I think they even had this really messed up version of Darwinism where it was a mix of Darwinism and creationism, that white people were made by God, but black people evolved from apes. And it's like, really? Yeah, so why are they biologically compatible at a genetic level? We have 6 billion DNA base pairs which can mix perfectly and all that sort of thing. Anyway, right, so that was all completely messed up, the apartheid stuff. As to what's happening since, I'm not entirely certain. It turns out Africa is actually a fairly rich continent. If you take a look at mineral wealth, Africa is not that far off places like Australia. Australia has also got quite a lot of mineral wealth to it. Uranium it's certainly got a lot of. But the population of Australia is like 20 million or something. Entire population of Africa, I don't actually know. What is the population of Africa? You have till I type it into a Google search engine to find out. What is the population of Africa? The entire of Africa. And it's about 1 billion people, turns out. So the entire of Africa has about the same population as China. Australia is nothing. It's like 20 million or something. So 1 billion people. Europe is about 500 million. And if you take all of this sort of area here, this is 500 million as well. So there's actually quite a lot of people in Africa. But if you take a look at it in terms of financial wealth, Africa is dirt poor. So if you do there's a map you can do. World by GDP, I think. GDP. And we'll do a search on images. And it basically shows you the map. There we go. This is, I think, exactly what I'm after. This is the world by GDP. Let's make that nice, a little bit bigger so you see what the hell's going on. And America is a good portion of it, quarter or so of the GDP. China and Japan, they do well. And Europe also does fairly well. And then you take a look for where is the entire of Africa. And I think this is the entire of Africa here, this little smidge on the side. This goes back to the Brexit days when people were saying that, why don't we look to great trading opportunities in Africa? And the entire GDP of Africa is comparable to that of France, right? The difference, of course, being France is 20 kilometers, 20 miles, that sort of thing, away from the UK. The entire of Africa is a long way away. So, I mean, this is the thing. Just the sheer geography is basically what determines a lot of the issues with Brexit. That you typically trade with people who are close to you. And in that sense, the UK is a fair-sized player in the world, There aren't that many bigger than it. United States, China, Japan, Germany, that sort of thing. But, on its own, it's geographically next to Europe. So, realistically, if you're going to go for the Brexit thing, the only trade agreement that really matters is the one with Europe, because they're right on your bloody doorstep. And Brexit, by the way, is going south spectacularly. If only someone could have seen it coming 4 years ago. And what was it all really about? If you take a look, what are the sticking points now in Brexit? It's about who gets to farm the fish. And there's this thing that who actually knows any of the rules that govern fishing? And it turns out for the UK, the entire of the fishing industry is about 0.1% of GDP. Tourism, I think, is about 6% of GDP. Yeah, the oven-ready Brexit deal, not so oven-ready after all. But anyway, so tourism, I think, is about 6% of the UK GDP. So that's 60 times as big as the fishing industry. But it's this thing that people get terribly patriotic about, We need the ability to catch the fish, whether it's I don't know whether it's 6 miles or 20 miles off the coast or something. These are things that no one would. If you take any person in the UK and ask them, what are the fishing rules? No one has the slightest clue, and it's even more complicated because Southern Ireland here, is part of the European Union, so they have their own fishing rights, and it even gets worse than that, in that even if the UK does have fishing rights to all of the area within 20 miles of its coast or something, it turns out that the UK doesn't actually eat that much fish. So even though it's 0.1% of the economy, it's like 3/4 of that is actually exported to the European Union. And you want to sort of basically mess up the status quo. And whether the status quo is fair or not, this is an open argument. I can quite happily accept that, the status quo is unfair. It would have in many ways helped if people who had been arguing about fish in the European Union for the last 20 years, like Nigel Farage, who was actually on the UK fishing representative or whatever, turns out he never turned up to any of the meetings. Any of them. It's like, what? Okay, so you didn't actually make any representations for the UK within the European Union in terms of fishing, and now you want to basically... This is what's going to dominate UK industry for the next 10 years. And when I say dominate, okay, turns out most countries do work, they work for themselves. Project Fear, it becomes Project Reality on steroids. Damn straight. Most countries overwhelmingly service themselves, in that you take a look at most of the industries that a country has, most of the things that it does are consumed within its own border. So, you make your own food, your own, not textiles, but whatever. Most of the stuff that you actually make within your own borders, your healthcare, that would be a good one, or your financial services. These things are done to service the people within the country, and that's about 80% of the country. It turns out it's only about 10% of the UK GDP is in exchange with other countries. Right? So the worst thing that can happen to the UK is its GDP goes down by 10%. But then you got to look at it in terms of a 10% shrinkage in GDP would be absolutely catastrophic. All of a sudden, all of your government services have to run on, right, if your GDP goes down by 10%, your tax revenues go down by 10%, and so you have to run your government with 10% less money. And this, it turns out, is an absolute bloody nightmare. Especially when you're running the National Health Service, which I think is the second largest employer in the world, second only to the China Army. I'm going to guess NHS workforce size. It's been a long time since I looked at these numbers. So I think it is. It seems tiny. 187,000. Is that all? I thought the NHS was the largest workforce outside of the Red Army. Let's try the Red Army. That's actually, which is the world's biggest employer. There we go. Chinese military. Now we're talking. Okay. BBC. Yeah, it can be as fake news as you want it to be. Okay. US Department of Defense. Seriously? 3 million? Okay. People's Liberation Army. Always a good sign for things. Walmart is 2.1 million. McDonald's. National Health Service. Okay, it's the world's 5th largest employer. Second to McDonald's. Incidentally, for those who don't know, I started my illustrious career working at McDonald's. I actually didn't mind working at McDonald's. Okay, it was menial and boring, but there was elements of teamwork there that were actually quite nice. And also, I liked working the night shift. And the reason I liked working the night shift is you would get these things called the close. It was in the UK. I don't know what it's like in America. I'm not so sure they close at all. But so the thing is that once it came up to 11 o'clock, everything would shut down, and everyone would count the food, and it would get thrown away. Apart from people were a little more relaxed about what they counted as thrown away. So I would routinely take all the chicken nuggets, which I remember one of these times, right? So I would cycle home, and when I would be cycling home on my bicycle, I could smell all the grease and fat coming off this big stack of chicken nuggets. But that's not right. So me and my brother at the time, we're both sort of late teenagers. This was bloody awesome, having a giant stack of chicken nuggets. But more awesome than that was the dog. We had a dog that was absolutely fantastic, devastatingly intelligent, and very, very expressive. But it was never quite so expressive as when you came home with a jacket stuffed full of chicken nuggets. Because first of all, it would be like, oh, it's so awesome you're home. And then it would be like, sniff, sniff. And it could smell all the grease and oil coming off. And it's like, and all of a sudden, the sheer expression of joy on this dog's face. It was happy to see me. But when it was me coming home with chicken, because it too got chicken nuggets. So it turns out that the National Health Service doesn't employ as many people as McDonald's had. But of course, all of those are employed in one. So in terms of governmental organizations, there's only the DoD and the People's Liberation Army. It's so bad calling something a People's Liberation Army. For those who don't know, there is a British comedy series which you absolutely must watch called Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister. It tells you everything that you ever need to know about politics and ever will need to know about politics, right down to the current election. Actually, no. It does go off the rails with Trump not conceding defeat. And Trump just redefines everything. It really is President Game Show Host. President Sore Loser Game Show Host. I could go on at length. Actually, I could bitch about for a long time. I mean, the most egregious thing, though, is this. That America is the most infected country on the planet with the highest death toll on the planet. If you were being honest, if you were being absolutely honest, and the first virus that killed millions of 20 million people, 50 million people, the Spanish flu, was called the Spanish flu because it was thought that it affected people particularly harshly in Spain. In reality, it originated in America, in Kansas, if I remember rightly. For those who wanted a world without vaccines, witness a world without one vaccine. Damn straight. Yeah. Thank you for the super chat, Simon. And it's one of those bizarre things that even with the vaccine, you don't know if it's going to help. You don't know if, in all likelihood, the vaccine will bolster, right? To get sort of a herd immunity type limitation on the spread of the virus through the population, you need to get about 60% of the people who can resist the virus. The vaccine, if the vaccine is perfect, of course, then it's 100%. If you take a look at what you're more likely to expect from a vaccine, it's more likely it's going to get you 30%. It's not going to be a golden bullet. Now, eventually, of course, the virus will go through the population, and hopefully you don't overwhelm the health service, whichever country you're in, whilst you're doing that. Is 12 inches too long for a solid... for a solid tube Dobsonian. For a second there, I was thinking, what the hell's a solid tube dob? And 12-inch is okay. 12 is right on the limit. It really is. 12-inch Dobsonian. I've never actually used one. I've got an 11-inch Schmidt, and that is right on the limit of what one person can do. All right, so I'm not a lightweight by any stretch of the imagination, and the 11-inch Schmidt weighs 35-ish kilos, 70 odd pounds, about the same weight as a sort of fairly petite girl. Oh my God, keeping up appearances. And Father Ted, also awesome. Yeah, so 12-inch Dobsonian. Yeah, that's it's possible. So what tends to happen once you get up to about 12 inches, 30 centimeters, is the tubes tend to be more flexible, so they need to be more solidly constructed, and at that point they get heavier, or people go over to more of a truss construction. Now, the truss constructions, the Skywatchers, I think, do some sort of collapsible Dobsonians. They're sort of hybrids. They're half solid tube, half truss type structure. I've seen good reviews about those and did actually think about getting one myself. But the simple reality is that almost unless you're getting a factor of 2 more out of your telescope, you're probably not going to notice that much. And seeing as the biggest telescope that I've got at the moment is an 11-inch Schmidt, that would mean I would have to go up to a 14. And at 14, those are only just portable. You really need to have those things permanently set up, and I just don't have somewhere where I could do that. So 12-inch Dobsonian, right on the limit. In many ways, though, this is coming back to when I was working at McDonald's. That's the first thing that I was working for. I got a 8-inch Dobsonian, which I spent so many long nights with. But there's the thing is that when I had the Dobsonian, all I had was a crappy little star atlas. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to get my crappy little star atlas. Here you go. This is my star atlas, wrapped in a plastic bags from Sainsbury's, where good food costs less at Sainsbury's. This is old. This predates the internet. That's how old this is. And you get a real sense for how old this is when you actually open it and you realise that it kind of comes apart. Back in the old days, before you could just type in something into Google, and this has been so heavily used, right down to the inside cover, where I have lists of the deep sky objects that I'll actually managed to find. Yeah. So it is a really cheap star atlas. But it was just me, my cheap star atlas, and my cheap ass telescope. When I say cheap ass, it was actually a fairly decent telescope, but it's the biggest telescope that you can get for the least amount of money. That was my Dobsonian. I spent so many nights out there. It was awesome. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to rant too much about the about the sky. Incidentally, yeah. I think I might have told you this earlier. What you're looking at there, beyond the imidazole crystal, is the inside of a bottle cap from Coke Zero. This is another one there. Those are the actual letterings that you get inside a bottle of Coke. I'm not entirely sure what they are, but yeah. Welcome to the inside of Coke. Right, so I get, how long have I been doing this now? I've lost track of time. Okay, where were we? Oh yes, gloating about Trump losing. That's such a shame. He was such a nice guy. He seemed to have such a warm and happy personality. Such a shame that he ended up losing. I'm going to try one more time. I have a SIO. There we go. Someone's got a SIO. Yeah, definitely. I'm up for using your SIO. Simon, yeah. Send me an email, which you can get on my YouTube channel through the contacts thing. It's like super easy to find. Send me that. Yeah, I'll do the SIO thing. I had no right. SIO, for those who don't remember, there was oh my god, they got like 25 million in the end for all of this. Hang on, Hello Hello was my favorite British sitcom. Hello Hello was awesome, and Rick Mail. It's yeah. So he died really relatively young, which completely sucks. Yeah, I mean there's yeah, there's Rick Mail and George Michael. Those and Freddie Mercury. Those were three that yeah, they had more gas in the tank. It sucked about those. Yeah, Michael Jackson, I didn't feel so bad about. He also died at about 50. George Michael also died at 50. Just getting fairly close to where I am. That sucks. I remember when I was a kid, when I was young, working at McDonald's. The idea, I was looking forward to the millennium, and it was so far away. Prince had a song, because tonight we're gonna party like it's 1999, and that was in the future. That was a long way in the future. Now, not so much. That kind of sucks. But anyway, SIO, they raised $20 million for this little gizmo, which was basically some really, really crappy infrared scanner, which was going to tell you about your food and all that sort of crap. And yeah, there was no way. There was no way that they were going to get any of that to work. And as far as I know, they've gone bust now. You know, it's one of those things, they technically have a Twitter account, which they occasionally... Actually, let me try their Twitter. I might be banned from this, actually. Let me try this SIO Twitter. So they claimed it was going to basically be like a tricorder in Star Trek. Twitter. I'll bet I'm banned, actually. Oh no, there we go. No, SIO. My SIO. There we go. And I'm not banned. It's always fun when I go to these places and I've been banned forever. And February the 25th, 2019. As you can see, they've been really active. May 2019. They've not been active for 6 months. And I think this was the guy banned. Okay, maybe he didn't ban me. Yeah, but okay. Last tweet, 2017. Yeah, so they claimed it was going to do absolutely everything, and no, it didn't. Yeah, near infrared. The guts of it were fairly interesting in that, you know, like 12 pixel depth of color on the near infrared, but basically everything looks the same in the near infrared. It's like Yeah, do things look different in red light? It's like, no, not really. The idea that you would be able to tell whether your food was good or bad based entirely on the SIO. Yeah, this little scan in the infrared. No. Um, do you think it's likely that we will have COVID in the same way as flu? Yeah, absolutely. This is basically a done deal at this point. The COVID virus has spread so far and wide that it's crazy in many ways that mankind is some huge fraction of the biomass on Earth. Um, okay, I think it's 1 part in 1,000, but that's actually for one species. When you think how many species there are on Earth, um, 1% of the biomatter is some absolutely colossal amount. Let's try this. Don't look at this. Let's try John Hopkins. There we go. John Lennon, he was good as well. Another guy taken before his time. But once you're up to all the time, if it had been contained in the rest of the world like it was contained in China, then yeah, might have been like SARS or MERS or anything like that. It could have been shut down and it would have been finished, right? But you take a look at where China is in terms of the world cases. This has just spread absolutely beyond control throughout the rest of the world. It lives on one of the most biologically abundant organisms on the planet. Um, this isn't going to go away. So it's like the way these things normally go with things like the flu. Right? And virus goal isn't to kill people. It's a little more than a chemical reaction. It's got no plans, no nothing. It's just it works like it works best. Genetic changes, the ones that make it work better, make it spread better. So with the coronavirus, what you're most likely looking at is the usual path that these things go down, is the virus becomes less lethal as it goes on, because viruses that are less lethal spread better. And that's basically all a virus does, is spread. Right? So the more successful virus isn't the one that kills the most people. However, this is where these things normally end up. The bad bit is you don't necessarily get there in one step. You can go through all sorts of tiers on this sort of thing, like smallpox and Black Death and all that sort of thing, right? So the eventual goal is kind of locked in, where the path that you get there isn't. And of course, we hope to not go down an evolutionary path for immunity on this sort of thing. But, realistically, there's only ever been one virus that was ever wiped out by mankind, and that was the smallpox virus. And, for that, we owe the World Health Organization a massive debt of gratitude. They actually managed to wipe out a virus, something that's never been done before in history of mankind. And what did Trump do? Yeah, he's withdrawing from the World Health Organization. That's a solution. A Voice of Thunder. What kind of spin, off spin? How do fungi work then? Actually, fungi and viruses. I mean, viruses are incredibly simple. It's and the thing that they have, of course, is they replicate like absolutely crazy, which is why they make up by sheer numbers what they don't have in sophistication. We are the opposite end of the spectrum. We make up in sophistication what we lack in numbers. So yeah, practical upshot. This brand of the coronavirus will be a genetic strain on this planet long after our great grandchildren have all. Actually, maybe not. Depends how sophisticated mankind gets in the future. But if this were any previous, if we didn't have the level of sophistication that we have in terms of gene sequencing and the potential for making a vaccine, this will go on for generations. But it's one of those things that, there were these accusations that the virus was engineered or something like that. I know we can wipe out COVID in a word. In a word from Bender, kill all humans. Yeah. You kill all humans and the virus is gone in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That's all it takes. So, let's not take anything off the table, But yeah, the idea that you can engineer a virus is just fuck nuts crazy. There's just no way you can do it. And yeah, we can't even really engineer a vaccine. The way that you get your vaccines is you sort of inject the virus into people, you let them generate antibodies, you work out what those antibodies are, and you try and manufacture more of those. That's basically a vaccine. We can't just sort of say, here is the sequence of the proteins on the surface of the virus. Let's go to our lab and sequence an antibody for that. We can't do it. Right? This is beyond our capability. And so the idea that you make a virus that not only just sort of there's this idea that it's all a manufactured virus from China or something. You can't manufacture a virus to do what you want. I mean, you couldn't even manufacture a virus to be contagious, really. Because the human body that actually produces the antibodies, you don't really know how it's going to behave. Lewis says, I find it unlikely that the WHO will be able to pull off a COVID like smallpox. Not a chance, no. With smallpox, they were very lucky in that this goes back to our original understanding of how viruses work. And it was this observation that milkmaids didn't used to get smallpox. Smallpox used to be hugely disfiguring. Even if you survived, you used to have hideous scarring for the rest of your life. And 1 in 6 died. It was along those lines. But it's a fairly well-known myth, anecdote, that the milkmaids never used to get smallpox or never used to get hugely scarred like this. And the reason is because they always used to get cowpox or something like that, a similar variant. And that basically made you immune to smallpox. And from that, people sort of started deliberately infecting people with, I forget if it's cowpox or whatever. But yeah, the viruses were sufficiently similar that if you actually produced antibodies for one, you produced antibodies for the other. They were evolutionary akin. And with the coronavirus, that's not an option. Yeah, I mean, the best that we have is we kind of guess which are going to be the spike proteins for the flu virus, influenza virus every few years, and you give that out as a vaccine. It's better than nothing, but it's still not great. It's certainly not to the level that you would get with the smallpox vaccine, where you take it once and you're immune for life. Yeah. Vaca. Yeah, means cow. Yeah, vaccine. That's awesome. COVID and climate change. At least we now have a data point for the Fermi paradox. I fear you're right. Someone writes, Voice of Thunder. I've seen your live debates on various channels. Very articulate, not at the moment. You make good points. You should get back to live debating. I don't know, should I? Okay, you give me some live feedback, right? Because I always saw myself as, if I was going to sit down and have a discussion with someone, I wanted an honest discussion with them. Whereas debates tend to be much more about, it's about point scoring, cheap point scoring. Why do some people collect stamps? That's a good question. Getting wasted with Thunder Fun. Yeah, it's a good way to spend a Friday. But sadly, much though I hate to say it, Turbo Turkey, this for me is I'm getting kind of sleepy. I started early. I started with not far after Pennsylvania flipped. Along with all my work colleagues. And this is the bizarre thing, right? I live in this microcosm, which is not America, where everyone follows the US election with hawkish focus. And someone says in Czech Crowns, have you ever considered corrective laser eye surgery? My brother actually had corrective laser eye surgery. And for me, it's kind of pointless on two fronts. The first one is I work in a lab. And if you work in a lab, you always, right? I mean, for me, I'm by no means Mr. Safety. I'll quite happily take all sorts of risks. But one of the ones that I wouldn't take is going into a lab without safety specs. And glasses are 97% as good as safety specs. So in that sense, wearing glasses is actually kind of useful like that. And if I were to go without specs at all, then yeah, whenever I go into a lab, which is 1/3 the time I'm at work, something like that, I have to put on safety specs. The other thing is that the corrective laser eye surgery, I did actually talk to some people about it. Apparently, when you're young, your head is growing one direction, so your eyes get squished or elongated, I forget which way it is. And then as you tend to get older, it tends to go back again. So there's really a window in the middle there where it's good, and I'm kind of at the tail end of where that would be useful. Live debating is pointless unless you involve facts and all that sort of thing. I mean, this is one of the things that I always found. I had these debates with Ray Comfort, and Ray Comfort is actually a nice guy. I never quite worked out whether he knew it was all bullshit himself. You got this kind of feeling that he didn't ask that many questions because he knew we'd be happier that way. But, people almost want to watch debates for the spectacle, for the theatre, for the gladiator moments where he sort of cuts the head off people and says, "Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?" And you can sort of see it. Yeah, I mean, okay, you want some entertainment value there, but I'm not spontaneously that kind of person. For me, I would have to kind of work at that. It's not a natural aptitude. So in terms of boring debates, this is the thing. I'm not selling it here. In terms of boring debates, yeah, I'm your man. But in terms of drama debates, where you're likely to get those boom, shakala, sky elbow, maybe not. I mean, for me, Hitchens was devastating like this. All right, he might not have had quite the depth of education and all that sort of thing. But when Hitchens went for the sky elbow, um, he was devastating. Yeah, even though a lot of the time I don't agree with Hitchens, watching him, he's beautiful like that. Hang on, someone sends me a message saying MAGA. Well, that's it. Oh, right. It says MAGA, and then there are Latinos for Trump, women for Trump, and chickens for McNuggets. Those are my work colleagues for you. No, Hitchens was just beautiful. And in that sense, I would... maybe I ought to, but I don't know. But for tonight, I think I'm going to call this quits. Daniel, I'm glad you enjoyed the debunking videos. Any thoughts on veganism? Well, with veganism, yeah. I never really did like the idea of killing things for food. The reality is, though, and this is the only thing that I won't eat. If I've got a choice of eating ham or not eating ham, I will not eat it. And the simple reason is pigs are fairly smart critters. And yeah, there's a hierarchy for me, right? Between eating smart critters is bad. You don't eat dogs, you don't eat pigs. Even though pigs taste absolutely delicious, bacon is gorgeous, ham is gorgeous, and so forth. Yeah. And even though it's also true that you can feed a lot of people off one pig, it is energy intensive, but practical details. Just for me breathing in and out, my carbon footprint for the day is about 1 kilo of carbon dioxide. If I eat more meat, that maybe doubles, right? So it's a significant impact on your carbon footprint. But when you take a look at that in terms of the first world carbon footprint, which is about 10 kilos of carbon dioxide per day, all of us, it's the transport, the heating, the clean water, all that sort of thing. That's got a fairly significant carbon footprint. The meat, not so much. That means it would certainly help. It would, and if with a lot of the, I think in a decade or two, this will all sort itself out anyway. In that, if you can make things like the Impossible Burger, which are basically indistinguishable from a regular hamburger and taste just as good. Why does something have to die for this? Now, there is an interesting side to this, which is a lot of the animals that we have in farming only exist because we farm them to eat them. And that, basically these animals are extinct the second that they have to... Thank you, Joe. These animals are extinct the second that we stop farming them. You take your average milk cow for certain. It sort of, if it's not milked daily, twice daily, these animals die very quickly. So it's a tricky thing there. Yeah, the water footprint, by the way, is the biggest concern with the global warming. You can change. Okay, the sea level rises. Some cities get flooded. It costs a few $1 trillion, but fundamentally you get time to deal with that sort of shit. If you change the water flow, you change where you can grow the food, and this is one of the main senses of false security that man has. You take a look at the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. One of those was famine. And the reason that famine was a horseman of the apocalypse, these were things that killed people. Disease, famine, death. And war. I mean, war is an amateur hour on all of the others. So it used to be that if your crops didn't grow very well, then you starved in winter, and it was a constant fear that you wouldn't have enough food for winter. Now that's long been extinguished. No one in the first world has any idea of what famine is, and this is because with mechanized farming, it's something like 2% of the people grow all of the food, and you can do this because of the internal combustion engine. That basically does all the back-breaking labor, which means that not many people can grow enough food for everyone else. However, that's only true while there is water to grow the crops, and that's the biggest concern with the global climate. With the climate change, is you change the water patterns, you can grow where you change where you grow food. Indiegogo has something up on Kickstarter. Thank you, Christoph. And one went by without me seeing it. How's voting going? I'm hearing in Europe something like dead people voting in The Simpsons. I mean, this is you take a look at the claims that Trump's coming out with. I mean, the mere idea that you could fix that Sleepy Joe. This guy could orchestrate sort of massive. I have lost me. Where's my election map? I want my election map back. How about that one? There we go. That looks good for an election map. The idea that you could orchestrate this all the way across a country the size of America. Zero chance. Zero. So, do we not have any more updated versions? Oh, really? That's the most updated version? 94% in California. Not California, Arizona. Okay. So with Nevada and Georgia alone, that's game over. Pennsylvania alone, that would be game over. Michigan is way beyond the margin of error. Margin of error is, I think, taken to be 0.5% on these things, maybe. If you're lucky, for the recount, it's automatic. More than 1%, you have to pay for the recount yourself. So Trump's not doing that. Basically, he needs everywhere. It's not going to happen. I am not Xavier. This is the thing. When I was a long time ago, when I wanted to be anonymous, I needed an alter ego. So I chose the name Xavier Lumens. For no other reason than it wasn't taken. And Xavier, of course, means Christ. So Charles Xavier, Charles Christ and Christian or whatever, and lumens. So it's light. That was just the name. Yeah, Xavier Lumens. It's not my name. I'm Phil. My name is Phil, but now it's sort of stuck in everywhere. So anyway, so that is the story of Xavier Lumens. And I think at that, I'm going to call it quits for the night because it's late and it has been absolutely awesome spending this time with you, savoring the very moment. You have to take a moment to experience this moment. Glad you enjoyed it. Many thanks. Might do one more again. Might do some more of the debates. Leave some comments about what sort of... If I'm going to do debates, tell me who I should debate or have a discussion with. I still can't bring myself to debate because, that basically means cheap point scoring over substance, but whatever. Tell me who I should debate. Many thanks. Good night. Love you all. And see you next time. Ciao.